One of the things that we've noticed as a part of this process is the lack of, one, documentation, two, lack of fee collection, and three, lack of DNA collection. And you would think that that would be a very fundamental part of our jobs, but it's easy to find gaps in this. And it's not that we're looking for faults, we're just trying to shore up those processes, make them better, and to improve the training that comes with that. So we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here today. On that note, I'd like to introduce Jessica Cook. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've now been with the department for 20 years, served in many capacities, and currently the Deputy Compact Administrator over the Interstate Compact process. So happy to be here, and I'm happy to be able to put out a directive and an understanding for the DNA collection, which has been, you know, over the 20 years, had several iterations, and we're excited to get everybody on the same page.
That's awesome. And like I said, this is a lot of the hard work that she's put into it, part of the ICOTS program. Just in my experience, again, Derek Coates, over 30 years in law enforcement, strong background in investigations. All of you within this room are experts in UDC and all matters related to it. Mine has been in the enforcement side. I'm typically submitting people to the prisons. You've helped me with. So I look to you as the experts. Having said that, I'm going to tell you what my experience has been with DNA because of my investigative life. My background has been, like I said, 30 years in law enforcement. I've worked in the FBI task force, which included sex assault, primarily investigations, cold case homicides, as well as investigative genealogy as part of the FBI team. I've also been on the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, where we've done studies nationwide to see where DNA could have solved cases earlier on than where they were at. Now, picture, many cases we're dealing with crimes that occurred either in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. We're using modern technology to solve them, but we're also identifying potential process issues with that. And that's the intent of this training for me, is to show you the why behind the why, and we're looking forward to your contributions to this conversation. So as with everything that we do in UDC, we've got to have our training objectives, and resources are a vital part of, for me, solving cold cases. So identifying suspects in new crimes, and ultimately preventing future offenses. So incomplete collections means justice delayed or denied for victims or their families. And this is why, again, partnering with Jessica today, we want to put this training on. Here are some things that we want to get across, but the big thing is documentation. The other part of it, resources. What do we have as UDC that we can offer you? And that, again, if I haven't said her name enough, Jessica, she's a great resource.
So we all know that there are legal mandates out there about who collects the DNA and which offenders we essentially take it from. And we wanted to make clear that all felonies and then Class A misdemeanors that have not had their DNA collected, we are to collect. If they're under our care, custody, or supervision, we are to take it. It is mandated by state law that we are to take it. So we're just making sure that that's very clear, and that we will submit those to the ODNA people.
And on top of that, we have a policy that clearly outlines what our roles and responsibilities are under AG 22, and I encourage you to read that on your own time. But if I were to emphasize anything, it's collect and document DNA specimens from all people under our care custody. That includes compact offenders. So I mentioned earlier the why behind the why. I'd like to talk to you what I feel purpose and role for UDC is. We clearly have a legislative requirement, but many of you are familiar with the Combined DNA System, or CODIS, which is a tiered system in forensic DNA database. And it combines accredited laboratories across the United States by their state DNA index systems. No names or other personal identifiers of the offenders, arrestees, or anyone being detained are stored using the CODIS software. It is literally looking like a hash value. There's an offender database, there's the arrestee database, the forensic database. That's where there's question samples from crime scenes that have never been identified. But these indexes assist us in linking crimes to each other and as well to known offenders. So resources such as these are vital to solving cold cases, identifying suspects in new crimes, and ultimately preventing future crimes. Incomplete or missing collections, like I mentioned, means justice delayed or denied for victims or the victims' families. You are the experts. I turn to you again for your experience and knowledge. And then my purpose here is to bring up some case examples that showed some missed opportunities to collect DNA and the potential for public safety to be compromised as a result. All the examples that I'm providing here today are not intended to criticize any individual or any agency. This is for training purposes only. They highlight the continuing need to improve or to do better. And as we get new data and new information, we improve our policies and responses to these types of subjects. Comment that how we did these things in the past is not necessarily how we do things today. I'm going to discuss some cases today in the next few slides, and all of the information within these are obtained from public sources. You may recognize some of these individuals listed, but highlight why we need to get it right the first time. So here's my first example. Anne Burr was only 8 years old when she was abducted from her Tacoma home in August of 1961. Ted Bundy, who was 14 years old at the time, lived a short distance away from the Burr residence. The reason I bring him up is because he denied any allegations he had anything to do with Anne's disappearance. Just as a side note, the side footprint was located outside the window. But would it surprise you to know that Ted Bundy's DNA was not in CODIS? Does it surprise you that someone with such egregious acts not being in CODIS? So an investigator I know in Washington still had evidence from the Ann Burr case, and she was reviewing this. She discovered that Ted Bundy's DNA was not in CODIS, and as he was executed in 1989. So she reached out to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, who just happened to have a vial of Ted Bundy's blood, which had been drawn back in 1978 when he was arrested for the murder of a 12-year-old girl in their jurisdiction. They were able to develop a full DNA profile 33 years later from his blood. So we're talking 2011. This profile was not placed in the convicted offender database given the legality of the circumstance, but was entered in what's called a legal database of CODIS. So it's a subset to be searched when you have him as a specific, or individuals like him who are specific subjects of an investigation. So while the evidence from Ann's case did not yield any results to Ted Bundy's, it highlights the importance of missed collection opportunity. So work like this forces us to look at ourselves, our processes, and how we can improve. And we should want this. This level of scrutiny is not a bad thing. Just for contextual, the first DNA used in a prosecution in the United States was 1987. And his DNA was not entered until 2011. So, and he was executed in 1989. So you can see there's like a big delay there. Here's another example. This is a recent example that you might have seen in the news. And this is an unfortunate circumstance. This is where we've had a person who was unidentified, who was discarded at the side of the road up in the Box Elder area. But it's a recent example of on how CODIS can help identify unidentified human remains. And due to the advanced state of decomposition, initial identifications were unsuccessful in this case. Police released an image of that distinct heart-shaped tattoo, asking the public for leads, and they were not successful. But in July 2025, investigators were looking further into her and who she was because she was identified through CODIS. And based on interviews that they were able to hold, they discovered that she had ties between Las Vegas and Salt Lake City. But this highlights where with CODIS, we have an opportunity to return back to their family, providing answers and possibly creating new leads for law enforcement to look at, because they're treating this as a homicide. Another opportunity. I mean, the news is full of examples where legal hurdles are often prevent the identification of serial violent offenders. For example, in this case, DNA profiles from Colorado crime scene evidence dating back to 1980 were uploaded into the national CODIS, but remained cold for decades until this guy, Alex Ewing's DNA was collected by Nevada, and it linked him back. So now picture, he's already in prison for another homicide in Nevada, but here's the problem. Nevada had a law that specifically prohibited collecting prior to 1997, and he was in custody. It wasn't until the AG's office to take a look at any potential gaps in their collection process, came out with this notice that we will collect from anyone under our care and custody. Within 2 weeks of his DNA being submitted into CODIS, he hit back to the homicide there in Colorado. And so now a case is no longer cold. The family of these unfortunate victims at least know who the perpetrator of the crime was. It doesn't provide necessarily resolution, but at least it gives them some answers to what was going on. And for us, I mean, he's already spending 110 years. It just keeps him in for a lot longer. So I bring up this cautionary tale. Maybe some of you are familiar with this. And again, I don't know what it is. It's Ohio. It's got to be Ohio. Something in the water. Maybe you're familiar with Anthony Sewell of Cleveland. He serves as a cautionary tale for corrections officers and for the criminal justice system, especially regarding the management of individuals with felony convictions, particularly concerning DNA collections and the CODIS database. So after his capture, Ohio Corrections completed an audit of their system and identified the following. And again, this is their words. This is how they've laid it out. There's a lack of verification and tracking. So this recommendation was to utilize a system for verifying the collected DNA swabs were correctly submitted and subsequently entered into CODIS by the appropriate laboratory. Failure in this procedural step occurred as Sewell can have, Sewell can have fatal consequences, as you'll see. It is important to understand, that there are some serious stakes involved. This case underscores that DNA collection is not just a task, but is a vital safety measure that connects crimes, identifies offenders, saves lives by preventing serial criminals from operating undetected for extended periods of time. So Sewell had committed several rapes prior to entering prison, that he was not known as the perpetrator, because again, the samples from those kits were uploaded into the forensics index, not the offender index, because he wasn't known. And it wasn't until after his DNA was finally collected and entered into CODIS that they became aware of those rapes. So could it have affected his ability to have been released before being paroled? So again, that DNA, he's in prison for a rape. He's coming up for parole, and they do their search, and his DNA, they don't see that his DNA is not in CODIS. And no one ever thought to take that swab. What happened is his ability to commit serial murders after his release was facilitated by that breakdown in the process, designed to track these high-risk offenders via their DNA. And it was definitely, there needs to be a better accountable process, is what Ohio identified for that DNA collection by individuals who do take those collection samples, such as yourselves. And the thing about, I'll just bring this up, this is, I think we can appreciate where they were at, but it might not have been the best thing. Inmates were the ones working the mailroom at the prison at the time he was in. So imagine DNA being collected and it's going through your mailroom and it's offenders and they see these things. Do you think they recognized what it was and may have interfered with that getting forwarded? Just a thought. But these are just some of the examples of where collections have been missed. And I just ask you to consider, in the case of compact in or compact custody, the fact that an individual's DNA has been collected in another state and entered into CODIS does not guarantee that it will be searched against other unsolved Utah cases due to the inherent design of the CODIS system. I apologize about that, which is subject to DNA regulations. Not everything will rise up just given the quality or standard for that state. So it's important to reach out and ask those questions if you do not see the DNA in the system. So that's my motivation to tell you why DNA collection is important as an investigator. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritties of what we're here for on the training side. I'm going to turn over the time to Jessica.
So now that we've gone over the why behind collecting them, we want to talk about who. So we want to be catching these on intake, whether that's intake at the prison or intake to AP&P. We do know that there's, direct commitment and direct placement. So we are tasking everybody in AP&P and DPO to run our people in the offender DNA database and check to see. Don't just trust that number one in the DNA screen in OTRAC when you're looking at the profile, and just based off that, say that there's a sample. We've seen some information in there that shows that there was one person that had 2 samples listed, and it was 2 refusals. So wasn't a DNA sample ever taken. Please don't trust that one. Click on it, see what it says, run them in the DNA database. So going over this again, new intakes. All intakes convicted of a qualifying felony or Class A misdemeanor, including Utah plain abeyance cases. Compact transfers going in and out. We want to ensure that we're taking DNA before they leave our state. And those who are coming in on compact in to Utah with a felony or Class A equivalent. So remember, Class B offenses, which do qualify for the interstate compact, we do not take DNA. So DUI and DV cases, depending on their offense. And if you have any questions when you're receiving that, reach out. Let's talk about it. See what the equivalent is. See if we can match statute and go from there with the DNA required in Utah. And then sex offenders and compact cases coming in. So specific populations, we need to go over. The offenders do not have the right to refuse a lawfully mandated DNA sample. So we have the legal authority to take the DNA, and we should, even if, they should have been taken at the arrest point or any time when they were in a jail. If it's not there, we're going to want to take that DNA. So probationers, parolees, anybody convicted of a Class A or felony offense in this for compact in and Utah State. And then all inmates, we know we do not put somebody in prison on anything less than a felony. So all inmates qualify, including custody compact in. Then offenders in our jails, meaning our IPP inmates, also qualify for DNA collection. We want to get out there and get those DNAs collected. And please do not, if we have anything to say about it, please do not get them to the point where they're going to the prison without having a DNA taken. Let's see, talk about the offenders compacting out. Please ensure that we're collecting. We do have a plan in place for those who happen to be sentenced via WebEx, and that it is in the training documents. Just reach out if you have any questions about that part. We want to go over a little bit of policy. There is policy. A815 indicates that the use of force may be necessary to take DNA. I've not seen that being an issue. Usually when we explain that it's policy, that it does need to be taken, it's not been a problem. We just want to make sure that we are taking that. Ensuring DNAs prior to their transportation arrangements. Yep. So for those who have been in custody for a minute and they're getting ready to depart, make sure that we take that DNA before they have the opportunity to leave our state without providing that DNA sample. So the next thing is the indigent offender. So we do know that in custody and in APNP that we have those folks who cannot at the time that they're placed on, and that we're required to take that DNA, that they may not be able to pay for that. That does not mean that we do not take their DNA. We want that sample on file regardless of whether you can pay for it or not. The in custody folks, there is a standard for that. And in APNP, if you're looking at waiving supervision fees for an amount of time, let's have that conversation with the captain or your chain of command. The plea in abeyance, while they're convicted, that is, they are guilty during that time of supervision. They do qualify under the DNA statute to have that collected. There is a separate process for having that expunged. And we can, when you have somebody questioning that, let us know. We'll go over that at that time. Derek, was there something?
Well, I was just going to say that because of the research that you've done, I looked at some of the numbers and I saw approximately 200 people that we currently manage under the plea in abeyance. There's again 200 people with this legal status, and then looking at this group in particular and their underlying charges, they range from Class A to felony charges, which include domestic violence to kidnapping. So again, it's important to collect from these individuals. They, like I mentioned earlier in those recent studies, if they're committing these types of crimes, they may be committing other types of crimes that you could solve.
So AG22 DNA specimen collections. While the BCI query can give you information regarding the DNA and having it out there, we want our folks using the DNA application, which gives us the full information. Do not trust the OTRAC #1 or #2 in the DNA screen in OTRAC. We want you to click on that, see what it says, see if you can tell that that sample is truly complete. When we ran the numbers and seeing that there was a lot that had a #1, but didn't have a sample on file. So we want to ensure that we're having our intake folks, you know, to the agents. You guys are being given access to BCI for the 72-hour hold process. We want to check you. So, you know, let the AA do it. If she can record it, put it in there, that's great. Double check it. You know, having multiple eyes on it is not a problem. Not taking the DNA is the problem. So when in doubt, check the ODNA application and at the DNA update, the DNA screen in OTRAC. So the assessment and collections of the fee. So it is by state statute, there is a $150 fee associated, 25 of which can be kept at the collecting agency. The other 125 are to be submitted out to the lab to process those. But we do not take the DNA based on the offender's ability or inability to pay. So we want to make sure that we're doing that on all offenders that qualify for those DNA collections. And you're going to want to follow the process for notifying your cactus tech in your regions to get that fee assessed. And then if they bring in the cashier's check and money order for that, that gets submitted also to your cactus tech. Missed that part. Did you say the professional staff is process the ODNA collection form? So they can, however, there's part of it that really is the responsibility of the agent. They want, the form should be being completed at the time that the agent is getting ready to take that DNA. It's part of the process, it's part of the screens, whether you are taking it or they are taking it, and the better information that we're putting into the system. So if they're doing it if they're entering that information at the time of sentencing, and it takes you a month and a half to get that sample from the offender, you've got a delay in the information. It's best to enter it and collect it at the same time. So sample collection verification. So we want the old adage, good data in, good data out, holds true when it comes to DNA collection. Entering the information into ODNA, entering the information into OTRAC. As we look through, I can tell when the original DNA samples were being collected and the information we were collecting at the time to what we currently have since the ODNA in 2016 was brought forth, and the more information, for example, the sample ID, things like that, that we can actually nail down and try to track this information down. So this goes over the steps. We want you to do your verification. Check the Utah Offender DNA database to see if there's a successfully processed sample. Somebody may have collected it 10 years ago and it was rejected and nobody's done anything about it. So if it's missing, we want you to collect the DNA. We want you to accurately update the information before taking that sample, and then we all access. So that's something that you'll want to check with your TAC about. We provide the link in just a minute. Test it. You should be able to log into it with your UCGIS password and your user ID. And if you can't, we want you to reach out to your TAC and get that access. It is a separate, so between UCGIS, the BCI, and the ODNA application, there is two separate, the application is separate from that. So we also want you to follow up with ensuring that we're charging that $150 to the offender's Cactus account, so that, you know, maybe they pay it during their term of supervision, and if not, you know, it goes to collections. So, and then we want the agents and we want the staff to follow up after taking that DNA to make sure that that was successfully processed. And if it's 60 days, because we're now inundating the lab with our samples, that we have followed up at 90 days and ensured that the sample that we submitted was actually acceptable and was able to be processed.
Abram, you had a good question, and we're going to try to answer that in a later slide. If we haven't addressed it, will you follow up with us? And again, because we're on a little bit of a tight timeline, but your question is valid, and we appreciate it.
So you have two options when searching the DNA. You have the ODNA website, which is the preferred query because it'll give you the full information, the whole picture. And then the UCGIS query, which you can run, the ODNAL query, if you don't currently have the ODNA website access. But the ODNA website is the tracking mechanism.
And we just posted that into the comment section, so you guys can test that out if you want to in the meantime. And David, let's see. If OTRAC does not show DNA on file, but ODNA shows it, what do we? So again, great question, and we're going to try to answer that specifically in the next few slides. Hold tight with us. We think you guys are on the same page as us.
Yes. So in order to log into the ODNA, we've given you the link. You can test out your user ID, choosing your agency code, and then your UCGIS password. You don't need to run away now. Check it. Save your link for later. And then if you're unable to log in, get with your agency TAC, okay? The next thing is searching the database. So as I've been running the numbers, we have several that were maybe taken in an original arrest and they've been using 17 different aliases. So you're gonna wanna search, you know, it's not a wildcard search, but limiting your information that you're putting in. I've done as much as your last name and your date of birth and not use the first name, because sometimes offenders have multiple first names and we don't know which the sample has been taken care of. So we're going to search it by using as limited information and wild searching, so we get more information back. And then you can verify with the SID or driver's license or things like that. So you're going to run your search and then see if you can get the information back. So the whole purpose of this training is to be able to, if anybody working at the prison YAM can't find the sample or is wondering about whether they provided the sample, we want them to pull up the training and be able to search the information and then enter that into OTRAC. So you're going to check all the alias names that are in OTRAC. You're going to use this little information as the last name initial and a date of birth to find potential matches. And you're going to have to do some searching. You're going to have to use multiple date of birth, because we all know that our people don't stick with their date of birth. They want to avoid having those criminal offenses tied to them. Okay. So the next thing, we have found that Yogi Bear has a sample on file, it shows that it's received and it's in process. So if I were to pull this up and I'd see this, I would enter in an alert in OTRAC indicating that in 60 days, I need to check this sample again. So you're going to document that information. You're going to set yourself a reminder, put it on the calendar event that in 60 days, you're going to run in again. And then when you get to the next one, you can see that there are 2 samples on file. And sometimes we do. Sometimes because of the crossover between the old system and the new system, 2 samples were created. Right now, it shouldn't allow you to collect a sample from somebody who's already been tested. When you're adding the information in under the add offender, if you're using a social security number that's tied to a DNA sample, it's going to not allow you to continue. So you're going to want to try to find that information, see if it really done it. Sometimes it takes some investigation to determine whether it was actually taken or not, because of the iterations of the DNA database. So this is a good example of somebody that has had it collected, 2 different dates of birth, which is probably why it was allowed. But you can see that that DNA status shows that the sample analysis is complete, and that's what we want to see. So the next slide, multiple results, ensure you're selecting the correct offender, and then you're going to click, once you have the result pulled, you're going to click that second tab. It doesn't really look like a tab, but it is a tab. So you've got the first section, and then you've got the sample, then you've got the fees. Don't pay attention to the fees because the fees there are only as good as the agent or the person who originally entered that. They took all the information and, of course, did a data merge from the old system, which collected the database information to it. So it may or may not be accurate. We're going to be doing an audit of the fees collected or assessed in Cactus or UDC collected offenders. But going forward, we want to ensure that we are giving that Cactus fee to our Cactus people, or our DNA feed to our Cactus people, so that we can assess it and try to start collecting on that. So you're going to highlight, this is how we want documented in OTRAC when the offender sample is on file. You're going to start with the sample information and go all the way to the sample status. And you're going to copy that information, and then you're going to paste that into the OTRAC scope.
So again, confirming this is just out of the ODNA. You're taking this information from ODNA and you're going to transfer it into OTRAC. In the OTRAC screen, you're going to fill in the drop down. So under the agency, if you're the collecting agency and you find that, but we, for some reason, haven't documented it, you're going to select our agency as the collector. If you see that Salt County Jail was the ones who collected it, you're going to select them. In this one, it's JVC, which is Juvenile Justice Court. And so we would select that if it was the Juvenile Justice Court that had collected it. You're going to select the appropriate agency. If you are a prison entity, we want you to use the prison location. I believe we go over that in just a second. But you're going to select the correct agency. You're going to put the date that it was performed, which is the collected date, performed by, and if it's not a UDC employee, you're going to put outside. So it allows you to type in the outside, otherwise it's a user ID. And then the date mail, if you are the person who's actually collecting it, you're going to put in the actual date you mailed that sample off. And then you're going to paste what you copied from the ODNA website into the comment section of this screen, which is what I've shown here. When you paste it, it does kind of parse it out a little weird. So I just typed in front of it, sample, and then you have the ID number, collected, and the date. UDC admin is my location, and the sample analysis complete. We want to see that record on every single offender. You may come across these even just in your regular job as you look through your case files and just see what information you can update.
Yeah. Get the information, or using the ODNA number for the sample number. That's, so if you look at the slide 30, the sample ID right there, that's the number. That's the sample ID number. That's how the ODNA lab has identified it as the sample ID. Does that answer your question, Randy?
Remick was also asking how you attain access into the ODNA database.
So you'll want to talk with your TAP.
I just caveat that not everyone in this training is going to have access to the ODNA, either as a part of their job or whatever. We appreciate everyone being here, but this is typically the people that will collect it or enter that information into the ODNA part.
Perfect. So now we've gone over that.
We were up to what happens if you have no record or no results or negative DNA because of a bad collection.
So I don't have access. So Jonathan, you're going to go and get with your TAP. It's just an add-on. You likely have it in the BCI side. They just need to add on that ODNA with the help desk, but it would be your TAC's responsibility to help you to that, or your alternate TAC. Okay. So if there's not a record on file for your person, you're going to want to add it. So in the screen, you're going to add new offender. It shows on slide 33. So once you've searched and you don't get a response back, that part where it says add new offender, we allow you to add that. We want to ensure that we are clicking on that and filling out all the known information on the offender. Please don't leave the information blank. We want to ensure that we're entering the SID number if we have it. We're entering the offense tracking number. We have that information generally. Please ensure that you're entering it in the system. It'll save the people at the lab a lot of time and headache by us just providing that information. So just make sure that you have searched the alias names and potential so we avoid that. Like I said, if you go along and you're entering the social security number, if it's already there, it won't allow you to add that social security number. So I actually ran into that entering Yogi's information when I was doing him as a test subject for this.
We got approximately 10 minutes left in this.
Okay. So you're going to want to make sure that you're adding the correct social security numbers, SID numbers, and everything, all the information that's available. I confirmed with the support service coordinators in each of the regions that they do have DNA kits and they do have the fingerprint cards, because we know that the fingerprint ink kits that come inside it are not good. So we want you to just get one of those, and then we're going to collect on every offender that comes into our offices that hasn't had a collection. So check with your support service coordinators. And then for DPO folks, we're working with them to get that updated. So we're going to fill out the card information online, and then you're going to print it. Make sure that that's the one you're using. Verify all the information before you hit that save button. You're going to place the sealed information. There's a whole training on how to do the collection separately from this. So we're just highlighting some of the things, but make sure that we're doing the correct information, the right offender, and that you're doing the chain of custody seal and signing on this, and then also placing it in the mail and getting it sent off. So on the next slide, there are two parts where you could potentially be having somebody sign. If you have somebody in your office that is great at doing fingerprints, you're going to you'll take the DNA sample and you're going to sign where that star is. This is saying that you, Jay, the sample, you're the one signing that you have collected the sample per the instructions on how to take the sample. If you have somebody else take the fingerprints for you, we're going to have them put the name and the signature for them on that other side. If you collect the sample and the fingerprints, just the signature up above at the start is where it's needed. And then we want to make sure that we're sending that card off. We want to ensure that we are verifying the offender's identity before we take the sample. Always wear your gloves and open the DNA kit in front of the subject. Use the sterile swab package. Do not touch the tip of the swab. You don't want to have your DNA associated with theirs. You're going to want to swab the inside of their cheek, rubbing firmly for 10 to 15 seconds on each cheek. Insert the swab into the collection pad. Seal the DNA packet in front of the offender. You're going to mark that the sample was collected. You're going to send the cactus fee off, whatever that looks like in your region, and send it off. So the fee is $150. It will show on their next offender statement. You're trained to have them available. Sorry. Okay. The fee is $150. It'll show on their next offender statement that's mailed to them monthly by the DOC. And then making sure that you are submitting that fee to your cactus person. See, on the bottom, we have the information required that, is entered for them for ensuring that that DNA fee is associated to the right offender for the DNA. And then handling refusals. Derek, do you want to take this?
Yeah, so as you can see from the top, we always prioritize safety over anything. DNA, we can collect it pretty much at any time. So use of force is literally a last resort, even though our policy and state law allow for it. So this is the consideration for that. And it is expected, like as you heard from Jessica earlier, that most people are going to comply with the request to submit their sample, but there is a possibility that they will refuse. We've seen that documented within our system. And that they may even say that it was collected by someone else. We're not arguing with them because the collection needs to be completed. So after completing the research into the ODNA and verifying that their sample was not collected or noting any issues with the previous collections, we still have the legal authority to collect these samples. And when we look at collecting, we have to look at what's the safest, least invasive way that can be used to complete the objectives. So safety includes not only for you and your coworkers, but for the subject that's being collected from. There are many other options available to you. This includes typical disciplinary actions, violation reports, referral back to the court to order the collection, even a potential new charge or submit a search warrant with a possibility for the use of force. Again, that's a continuum, and it's always best that you consult with your supervisor as needed in that regards. AG 22 spells this out wonderfully, and our best resource is our ability to talk. The fact that we can use force does not mean that we should or even need to. Just a simple explanation that it's just delaying this step. It's inevitable, and we will get the DNA sample. Document it in OTRAC. That's the big thing apart it. That's all I would say to that one.
So on the out-of-state convictions for those DNA coming in, you heard it today. I want you to share it with your friends. I want you to know this. We do take DNA samples on people who have been convicted out of state. There is a process. You can enter it, and you are expected to. So going forward, we will start putting this in the TR responses that the offenders shall be prepared to provide a DNA sample upon the first time that they report into our office if a sample is not on file. We do have a lot of people that are returning to the state of Utah who have had a criminal history here. So oftentimes that will be on file already and it won't be an issue. But we want you to know you are to take DNA from those convicted of a Class A or felony offense on compacted offenders. So the out-of-state record creation, this shows you will select the jurisdiction indicating that it's an out-of-state conviction, and that will make it so that like the OTN or things like that are not required. And you'll select the unknown court ORI so that it doesn't associate it to a Utah offense. It is important that that's what you're using when you're collecting for the out-of-state, especially those without a Utah criminal history. You're going to select the information for the offense that we're receiving. You're going to use that one from OTRAC. My staff has already taken a look at the offense and selected the most appropriate one in OTRAC. If you find by chance that one is on there that you think that there's a better Utah offense, let us know. We're not perfect. We're going to go ahead and enter that information. Still need to collect for Utah. Absolutely. We're collecting if a person has been convicted of a Class A or a felony offense in the state of Utah, or incoming compact on a Class A or felony offense. So it talks through how to enter those. It shows the information when you're choosing the unknown court ORI. It's possible. It's out there. Let me know if you have questions when you're getting ready to enter these. We'll walk you through it, or I will walk you through it.
And just so you know, this presentation in PDF version will be made available to you. So this is just, first off, I appreciate it. You've made it this far. I know this is a lot of information overload up front. We're almost across the finish line on this one, and appreciate you and the work that you do to help us collect from offenders to make sure that they also succeed in complying with their obligations. And while we continue to make communities safer in Utah. So this is just a summary sheet of the steps and expectations, policy supporting the work that you do. And even if you fell asleep, you'll still have this available to you at a different point. So I appreciate it. This, coupled with the following slides that have some resources in UDC, should set you up for success. Like we talked about, Jessica's your resource. Do not confuse Matthew with Derek. I get a lot of his emails. Just make sure you check it before you send him something.
Now that we've finished that up, is there any questions?
I'm going to send this in the meantime while we look for other questions. Thank you, Sergeant Robinson. He sent the link to the roster. If you want to get credit for today's town hall, please get on that. And we'd love to have you answer some of the questions that you'll see in there. It'll help us understand better before. Abram, please help me out with that one. I apologize.
I'm scrolling up, Abram. If an offender is already on ODNA, but there is an error in the entry, such as the name is wrong, the social security number or date of birth matches, or vice versa, how do we collect again or enter a new file? So if there is an issue with that information that you believe is the correct offender, on the resource page, Derek, if you go up to the one with Tanya, you're going to email to Tanya and provide the sample ID and the information that you believe is incorrect and have her correct it. Because it could be that, or that we need to add an alias or something to our system. We have to realize that not our social that we have listed may not be his actual social security number. So if you have the offender bring in his social security card, or he or she their social security card, and you can verify that that is their social security, then I would reach out to the CODIS folks, Tanya Fisher or Carrie Duke, with that information, providing the proof and asking them to update that sample information. Does that make sense?
So for those of you that are having issues with signing, we did publish it. Let me make sure.
Yes, Abram, if the information is incorrect, please.
Can I add something real quick? We've had a couple that have dropped and come back in. If you did not attend essentially the entire session from about 11:15 till 12, we are recommending you do not sign the roll and take this course when it comes out into ACADIS in 2 weeks. Otherwise, you potentially are missing vital information and you're going to be expected to follow according to policy.
Janelle, your TAC is individualized per region. Which region are you in? Okay. Janelle, if you wouldn't mind messaging me, I can get you that information.
For those of you that called in on phones, I'm not sure how to handle your roster issue. If you want to send myself or Lieutenant Clegg an email directly, let us know.
We encourage you to take once we get this up to a cadence, we encourage you to take that as well. It'll allow you to go through at your own pace and review the information that we provided in a more in-depth detail. And then if you have any questions in the meantime, please reach out. We'll take care of your questions and help you understand.
Lieutenant Clegg is a movie star. He has graciously conducted a DNA collection example video. So you'll be able to see him. I want you to congratulate him on the great job he did. He's a movie star.
Yes, Aaron, the link for the survey is also, it's survey and roll combined.
Denton Lurch is from the Addams Family. I believe Goonies is Sloth.
If you don't know your post ID number, you can find it. Gave you some instructions there. That's right, Nicole. That's how it goes. All right. Anyone with issues with signing the roll, we are able to see who was in today's training session and how long. So feel free to give us an email if you have an issue. Travis, go for it, buddy.
He's probably trying to unmute himself. Just type it into the chat, Travis. We've disabled everybody's being able to unmute.
Oh, that's why I put Clegg in charge of this. So glad.
Otherwise, we get chaos.
Through chaos, I don't know, something profound. I think we'll go another 5 minutes if we have any questions that show up. See how we can work with you. I don't know if we need to stop recording. Brooks, that is on the back end. Better to enter it. We don't know who regional tax are. I apologize. We can get that information, but that's going to be an offline conversation. Send a message to like Jessica or even myself. We can find it out. The link for the roster was put in the chat. If you called in by phone, I apologize. There's currently no known way for me, at least for you to sign the roster, because there is a questionnaire that comes with it. If you have a problem with that, send myself or Lieutenant Clegg. And again, that's not Matthew Coates, that is Derek Coates and or Clegg.
Yes, Justin, you're certified staff. We want you filling out the form and taking DNA. Let's see. Yes, in Region 3, the Cactus Tech, that's we can use with BCI TAC. The Cactus Tech is Diana Moritz.
Oh, Brandy. Thank you, Brandy Aguilar.
And then what agency do you pick on the offender DNA database test? Ryan, you're going to pick your agency, which you belong to for your ORI. So it would be basically what your agency name is under your ORI. So for myself, it's corrections admin or UDC admin. And so that's the one I would select when I'm logging in.
So Lister, it'll probably either be the nuke one, or if I'm remembering, you're at nuke, or it might be release and reentry if they've got that added.
Yeah,
so
it depends on which agency you're falling under. And Janelle,
when in doubt, ask your TAC. They can tell you where it's at.